Just going to get started here in about 4 minutes. As you 2 folks have joined, I'm not sure if the chat's working, but feel free to fire me a note here to just double check. Hey everyone, just getting started here. I know there's only a couple people joined right now. Anybody on here, if you can jump on the chat would be great, just to let me know. You can hear me okay? Oh, thanks, Emma. Perfect. I think it's just you and me, Emma. We'll wait and see what the count looks like here in a moment. And it looks like it's auto recorded here. I went into the settings, Emma, so should be all right. I put a date stamp on it so people can search. All right, a couple folks have joined. I'll give it one more minute. And for those who couldn't make the session tonight at the Franklin Club, I'll see you guys soon, and we'll have this recorded so we can go from there. All right, guys, I'm going to jump into it because this is being recorded. As people join, we'll go from there. So, so if you, oops, I'll just get this all set up. Bring this in like that. Okay, so I'm going to go through my top 3 flies for spring at the Franklin Club. So, before I jump into it, a couple things to remember. Think about in spring, the water's been really, really cold. So depending on where you're fishing at the Franklin Club, it doesn't matter where you're fishing. There's 3 rules. First is where are the fish? Enter joke, they're in the water or something like that. But fish will definitely be lethargic as the water's warming up. Think about ice has just come out. They're going to go to the locations with the best water temp. So they're deep right now or at various outflows. As that water starts to warm up, they're going to move into bays, and then they're going to actually start to move up in the water column as the sun, later in the season starts warming the top layer. So number 1 will be, and when I'm spring fishing, it's really taking the time to find the depth the fish are at and also moving around a lot, because right now you're going to have to take some time to find the actual fish. And once you're overfish, and then it's really figuring out what's going to work best. So these are my 3 kind of top go-to flies for spring anywhere. They work exceptionally well at the Franklin Club. So I'm going to go through them quick. And if there's any questions, just fire me on the chat. So the number 1 fly, so anything with black and green is a great thing to remember for the spring. So black and green, and for those who joined, just hit me on the chat if you have any questions. Black and green is just one of the best color combinations for spring. It's something you should think about every time. Okay, it's spring, black and green. So I'm going to start with my variation of a pretty famous fly in Canada, like it's originally called a vampire leech. I'm going to tie it a little bit different. I'm going to show you a little twist I like to do after fish have got pressured a little bit as well. So here's, I've got about a size 10 hook here, wide gap. So number 1 would be when you're choosing a hook, any wet fly or streamer hook will do. I don't go overboard on the hook size. I'm looking for a long tail and a lot of movement. And I've got a pretty big bead in there. So it's a pretty aggressive bead going on here. I want it purposefully bright green and aggressive. When the fish go off that, I'm going to show you the variation I like to use. So it's a 3.8 millimeter brass bead. So a little bit of weight here. It's going to give it more of this motion in the water. It sinks pretty fast, but if you want to pull it, it's going to do that. We're going to have to find the depth. So I want a fly that'll actually go through the layers pretty quick, and I can, start retrieving it to see if the fish are in the mood for a chase. By that, I mean, they're still feeling a little lethargic. As the water moves up or you see some more active fish, I'll always give this a go. This pattern works really well as the water starts to warm a little bit in the spring and the fish get active, but it's always good to have a lure or streamer, whatever you want to call it. So here we go. Black thread, doesn't matter what size, doesn't matter what, really even what color, but this is just gel spun thread that I happen to have around here. I'm just going to put on my tying glasses here. Okay, so base of black thread, real basic stuff. The original vampire leech to me has a really short tail if you see it tied, and they wrap it with UV. Fritz, I like this version a lot better. So it's going to look a little crazy with the tail length, but bear with me. And fishing, over in the World Championships, over a year ago, something they figured out in Australia is long tails make a big difference. I wouldn't be as afraid of the nipping at the tail or what people think here. This more movement in the pattern is better. So it's a nice piece of Marabou. I use Dave Downey's Marabou or Hen's Marabou, and all I've done is plucked a good chunk, but not overboard. So I'm not going for a super dense tail. So you can see that's about the density of the tail, but it's really, really long. So first thing I do is pinch off those end fibers that don't have that plush Marabou look to it. So it's not that stringy stuff you find at the top. Oops, I can do it. Up in here, it's that nice plush Marabou down on the bottom. And it's going to be about 3 to 3.5 times the hook length. So I've just kind of trimmed off the excess, and I'm going to tie that in really long. It's a little long, so I'll take a little bit of that. So as you can see, that's about as long of a tail as I'm going to use on that. So, you know, the original of this from like, geez, 30, 40 years ago was called a tadpole, a green tadpole. It had a long tail like that as well. The fish will take it, you know, so this is going to give it a lot more movement. You know, it's spring. We want to entice, especially when the water's cold. As it warms up, it's the movement that makes the big difference. So the original right now would have a short tail and a whole bunch of UV frits that you can buy. I like to tie it a little more subtle than that. So I go back to my Marabou. I'm grabbing kind of this stuff off the bottom, a little bit short. Grab a chunk of that and dub it onto the hook. So we're treating it as really as dubbing for the body. So next, what I'm going to do is you can do, you know, black UV ice dub is what I use. So you can either use, this is Hen's, you can use Hairline, anything like that. So it's just black UV dubbing. So Hen's black UV dubbing. I'm going to take it like this. And so what I've dubbed Marabou on, and now I'm actually going over top of that dubbing with the UV. So it gives it this kind of half Marabou, half dubbed Marabou, half ice dub body. And you know what you're thinking, he's way overdone it, and so, which it looks really ridiculous right now. So I've got this really, really loose, fat body, half Marabou, half UV ice dub black. But when I brush this out, I'll take this is just, Velcro on a popsicle stick. You use whatever brush you want. But if I brush this out, and I'll brush it back over the body, I get a much different effect than the original. So it's a lot more subtle. You can see, and hopefully you can see that. There's a lot more, I'll tilt it like that. You can kind of see that I've got this really nice dubbed out body, much more subtle with a bright green head. So that version, then just tie off and off you go. It's, it's a fancy version of a woolly bugger, whatever you want to think of it as. But it makes a really, really more effective fly, I find, especially when you're constantly casting over fish from the bank. And when you're casting this, the fish are, you can fish this slow or fast, find the retrieve, find the depth, take the time to do it. But this fly will suit you really well. So it's kind of a more subtle version of a vampire leech. But if you're fishing that, like that, and the fish go off of it, this is what I'll switch to, is I'll go to a much smaller hook, actually. So this is a size 14 wet fly with a dark bead. So little tiny guy. It's very, very similar tie, but got some subtleties to it. So this is so I got a really small bead on here, 2.5 millimeter. This was a brass bead on that one, 3.8. So I'm really going for the color more than anything. On this one, I've got a little mini tungsten bead, 2.5 mil. So I want to get that same motion in the fly, but I don't want to really overdo it with a big bead or anything like that. So it's really, you're putting the bead for the motion of the fly, not for any attraction. Whereas this one, as you can see from a mile away, has got that giant green bead. It's purposefully aggressive. I always start with this one, just to see if the fish will take it. And if I'm catching on it and it goes off, I'm like, okay, I've pounded them on this one. They still like this fly. Let me go to a smaller one that's a little more subtle. So same again with this Marabou. Let's just see here. If you have any questions, hit me up in the chat box. I'm just checking it over doing it. Yeah, so a little small amount like that. So about 3 times the hook size. Again, I'm maybe a little bit longer than that. Not as long as the other one because it's a smaller fly, but it's still pretty long. And if I don't like it, I can always trim it back a little. If I think that's a little bit long, just take your fingers and pinch it. But I would go probably no shorter than that. So you can see this is a beast compared to this one. But it's still got a pretty long tail, but it's a lot smaller profile. So on this one, green and black is still the go-to. What I'm going to do is take, so like lime green, fluorescent green, grab your favorite dubbing. This is a UV ice dub, doesn't have to be UV. Although UV is a good dubbing for both river and lake when it's cold. I don't know why. There's probably some great reason for that. It tends to work really well when it's cold. So the hot spot goes on the butt on this one, and I'm not overdoing it. So it's just this little hint of green, like so. And then I take, again, a little bit of Marabou like the other one. I'm going to dub a body in front of that. And again, with a little bit of a pinch of the ice dub. So all that goes over like so. And that's about it. And I'll tie that off and then I'll brush it back. So like so. And brush it back. So still black and green, but this is one of my favorite versions of it. So little green hotspot on the back. So very aggressive, subtle, black and green lure. Call it what you want. Call it a tadpole. Believe this is actually called a Pepe Lopez if you look it online, but it's really I would call a real subtle green tadpole. But any variation of that black and green, some type of Marabou based, call it lure or pulling fly, is a must-have for the spring. Again, may not work now. I mean, let's call it still winter. But as that water warms up and those fish are starting to chase, you'll want to have black and green and something like that. So that's number one. And I'm not sure who's online, but they're going to roll their eyes in a moment because they're going to say, I can hear you now, of course he's doing that. I have to do it because I am tying my favorite flies here. So the next one is a Chartreuse green mop. You know, black and green, feed them the green. This fly in 3 versions is just a must-have. So for those who have never heard of a mop fly, it's off a mop. So I wouldn't buy, I don't like the mop material that you buy that comes in those packets. I do buy some of it when I can't find the color. This color seems everywhere. This is one of those little mitts. Canadian Tire will have it. Dollar Store has it. And actually, when you look, there's different colors of green. So I really like the Chartreuse bright green. I find this is a little bit better than the mop material. It's more durable. And there's a real secret to making this a durable fly. So I'm going to tell you two different, but there's 3 ways I tie it. It's really about how it fishes. So I've clipped a piece off, get rid of this little bit of excess. The first way actually is just straight up. And there's and so the first thing you need is white thread or a clear thread or chartreuse thread. I'm using some 6/0 here. It's pretty thick stuff. It's because I'm going to use it to tie. Whoops. Sorry. Bear with me. Technical difficulties on the thread right now. The number one reason I'm going to use the 6/0 is all about tying a booby fly in a moment, but I'm going to tie this one first. So this is just the OG. Really great way to fish on the drop. So this doesn't have a bead on it. It's just you would fish this either by itself or with a couple flies on about same as the other one, about a 10 to 15 foot leader. Both of these I kind of like as singles, although this one you can put with, you know, a blob or something. But again, I wouldn't be too aggressive in the spring. I like fishing single fly or maximum 2 flies. And if I do 2 flies, if I'm fishing this type of stuff pretty far apart. So if you're not used to a long leader, maybe 7/7 or something like that, you can fish this off a floating line, intermediate, sinking line, all that stuff. Oh, we got a mop. Yes, here. Yep, it's coming. Yeah, you can wash your car. You can. Could you put foam eyes on? Oh, you betcha. The foam eyes are a coming. So I'm going to show you the 3 different ways to kind of have the mop and fish it. And yes, this may be the end of fly fishing as we know it, but there is some method to the madness here on this material. And I guarantee if they had it 200 years ago, they would have used it because it just works. So this is like mop chenille. It, grabs water. And what it does is it'll, when it's unweighted, it kind of just sinks at this beautiful pace and kind of moves around like that. So this fly, I don't like to move much. I just fish it on the drop, as it's called. So I am missing my glue. Where is my glue? Oh, there it is. So the first thing I do is like to make my mops durable. So there is one member at the Franklin Club who maybe set the record for the most fish ever caught on a fly. And I don't think I'm exaggerating thinking. I think he cracked 100 on one single fly. So this is when I say it's durable, it's durable. So thread base is key. And the next, I'm taking Zap-A-Gap or take your favorite glue and put it on your thread base. And what I'm going to do is just take the mop, put it right on top like that, right to about the hook eye, like that. So that's going to glue it on there. And then what I do is I actually wrap the thread over it. You can see we've caught up to the hook eye there. Maybe went a little aggressive on the mop on that. And I'm actually running this white thread back over the body. So don't get too hung up on, I've latched it down and it's a little bit mushed. When I'm doing those wraps, I'm actually, watch how loose I'm doing them. So really loose wraps, and as I get and then I'll tighten it up. So I get this little bit of a taper. I don't try to munch it down too much, but a couple things that will do for you. I totally crowded the head on this one. So, I've only tied about 1,000 mops, but I overdid it. There we go. Couple things that'll do. A really, really long tail tied here wraps around the hook. You get easily enough movement out of it. And then what this does is it just makes it super, super durable. So that is about the extent of the tying required on that one. So, tie off, fish it for a lifetime, and go on with your life. But this one is really around fishing on the drop. So when I say that, you cast out, make sure your fly turns over and keep up with it. And by that, I'm doing really small hand twist. I'm not moving it much. The extent I'm going to move this fly is maybe 1 or 2 strips. And so think of that going in the water. Here's your fish cam. It's coming down like this, and I'm waiting for a take. I am watching the loop off my line. I'm put the line through my fingers. I'm feeling for anything, and I'm counting as it drops, because this is really going to tell you the depth the fish are at. And a lot of times fish like food that just kind of comes down. They're raised on pellets to start with. A lot of food moves up the water and comes down. And I will when I feel this has got deep enough or too deep, a couple pulls will move it back up, and then back on the drop. So the unweighted mop is awesome to fish on the drop. You can also, if you want to fish it with another fly, it's unweighted. It works pretty good. The next version I'm not going to tie, but I love it for bung fishing or under a bung being an indicator or something like that, is I like to put a gold bead in front. So I tie it the exact same way, stick a gold bead on it. I go actually pretty big brass bead, like a 3.8. I actually want the little bit of a flash. I don't go tungsten. That gold bead combo for me at the Franklin Club is just deadly with this mop fly. Purpose for that is when I'm fishing a bung, I'm not trying to necessarily fish this drop technique. I'm trying to really gauge where the fish are in the water column, setting it at 2 feet, 3 feet, 4 feet, finding, and it'll go about like this pace, and it's going to stop and sit there. I tend to use the beaded flies for static fishing. I don't actually retrieve much, although you could cast one out and retrieve it. I just don't. I tend to fish the mops pretty slow. I think the subtle action of it moving is the key. So then the other one, the one I really like when the fish are deep. So when we get the ice out, there's going to be a lot of fish in deep water. They're going to move into the bay. If you're fishing off on the main lake, they're looking at the road. The outflows usually got them. They're down there. It's keeping the water temperature a little bit better down as they come up the bank there, and then they're going to move over in the bay. That's where I'll tend to fish this one on the drop a lot more. But right out of ice out, and the fish are deep, I'm going to fish a fast sinking line. For those who don't know, fast sinking line, something that's like 5 inch per second, sometimes 7 inch per second. I mean, if you don't have one of those, just wait. Any sinking line will get to the bottom at some point. So I'm going to add some, I'll tie a Booby version. So all like kidding aside, like chuckle, Booby is putting some foam eyes on a fly. So this is, I 5mm Booby cord. You can punch it yourself, or you can buy it at Drift or anything like that. And what I'm going to do is just take it and snip it in the middle. So it's going to give me, for every piece of Booby cord, I get 2 Booby eyes. 2 ways you can do Booby eyes. So first thing you never do is leave them square. It just doesn't fish right. The fly moves weird. The one way to do it is just take your scissors and take the edge off. So in one turn, as I'm slowly closing the scissors, I take the edge off. So you can see that edge is rounded. This one, square. Or my new fun way of doing it, as I go off camera here for a second, is the Dremel tool with this little bit on the end. So cover your ears, everybody. And so you take it like this. Gives you that dentist vibe. Look at that. Nice little rounded eyes. And you can just spend all your COVID time rounding Booby eyes. So this is my new favorite toy, is the Dremel tool. So let's show you, that's the Dremel side. That's the manual. Fish don't care, just makes me feel good. And then the last way you can do it, if you're really, really over the top on foam eyes, you pop these in a little bit of a foil tray in the oven at like 275 for like 10 seconds, and it'll just round the eyes out if you've trimmed them like that. That seems like a lot of work. I don't need to bake Booby eyes, but some people get really obsessed with them. But if you have confidence and it'll help you fish, then do it. So I'm going to use a size 10. I didn't say the hook, all around from Hanak. This works really well on mop flies for me, because what I love about it is that huge hook gap. So that it just sticks the fish for sure. You could use a Jig Superb as well if you don't have it, or any hook you like. But I again, real harping for me is wide gap hooks hook more fish, and barbless hooks hook more fish. And that's not when you pinch down the barb. When you pinch down the barb, you get this little bump. That barbless hook has got like a needle point and it turns up. It takes less pressure to hook the fish. And they've done studies, you land more fish on barbless hooks, not the push down barb, which we all got the bad rap of losing fish. That takes a lot more force to get over that bad bump that you've got there. These are fantastic flies for hooking fish, and it doesn't take a ton to set the hook, so you can use lighter tippet. Although spring, I'm using like 8 pound. I wouldn't overthink it. Okay, Booby version. Well, it's getting exciting. So I've used this 6/0. This is where you want thicker thread. If you go thin, what you're going to do is you're going to cut the Booby eyes. It's a real pain. You did all that nice job with the Dremel tool and then gone in an instant. So thread based. I put the Booby eyes on first. I'll show you how I do it. So back to the eye of the hook. Thread hangs. Beautifully done. Booby eyes here. Some people put them on like this and then just wind their thread over. I like to line it up myself, just kind of where the middle is, and then I just take the thread and do 2 wraps. And those 2 wraps will let me eyeball and go, yeah, those Booby eyes are good enough. So see, it'll just stay on there. It gives you lots of time. So I put first shot a Zap-A-Gap. We'll lock in those eyes. So I roll up the eyes like this, and they just kind of lock in. See, thread just stops there. And now I grab it and do a couple of figure 8 turns. Lock it in there. So I don't go overboard on the figure 8s or anything. This glue is gonna dry and lock those in. And if I don't like that, gee, that Booby eye is a little big, you can just go, okay, now's your time to get it right. So good enough. It's a mop fly, right? So good enough. 2 ways you can do it. Sometimes if I want, I'll tie a whole bunch of these like this, just tie it off. But with the mop fly, I usually just finish it. So mop fly. So again, I've just cut off another piece of mop material, as it's been called now in fly shops, or just a chunk of mop. Same again with the glue. Put some glue in there. You want that base. Otherwise, just makes the fly way more durable. I put it right to the edge of the booby eyes. And again, tight when it's here. And then as I get farther down the hook, I loosen and then loose and then taper. Right. So there she is. The Mop Booby. Beauty. So I use 2 different color eyes, yellow or green. Choose your own adventure. Use whatever you want. I just kind of, as I said, black and green is my go-to for a lot in the springtime. And this works a treat. So there we go. And then I hit it under the eyes one more time with some glue. So that there. And it's somebody's favorite fly for sure. Somebody's wife's favorite fly. So yeah, for good reason. Kills it. So there we go. All right. Mop. And so we're gonna get off the green and go with black. So there's a real black and green theme going on here. So the last one, a lot more natural. It's a spider pattern, a black spider. So this is for those who've been to clinics of mine at the Franklin Club, I talk about Arthur Cove. He's an old British guy. He's passed away, but considered one of the greatest stillwater anglers of all time. And he was really a bank angler. And he invented, believe it or not, buzzer fishing on a floating line. He came up with that like in the 60s. He has 2 famous patterns he used to use. One's called a Cove pheasant tail. It's really, for those who know, Ian James was one of his favorite patterns. And it's really a pheasant tail with no tail and a little bit of rabbit fur on the front. I don't find that works as well in the spring for me. It's a brown color. I could tie a black one. There are lots of buzzer patterns. It's a great time for buzzer patterns. I like this one for spring because you can fish it a bunch of different ways, and it has a little bit of movement built in. So this is truly, it looks like a wet fly, but I fish it as a buzzer. So I'm going to tie, you can tie this on 10s, 12s, and 14s. So have a couple, 12 being kind of my go-to. I'm just going to tie a 10 so you can see it. But a 10 there's nothing wrong with a 10. The key to this pattern is your hook density and the number of wraps on the hackle we're going to do. So it's a real simple fly, black thread, silver wire, which is somewhere around here. I will find it in a moment. I've been doing too much tying. You don't actually truly need the silver wire, so I won't lose any sleep over it. I might have to do it with red wire, guys. But tie this with, I don't know where the silver wire went. Somewhere here. Can't find it. Doesn't matter. So I'm going to tie this with red wire, but we'll use our imagination that it is silver. So black and silver is a great buzzer combination. So it's kind of a standard. This fly, if I could use one fly in the spring, this is probably it. It just destroys. So this is a standard wet fly hook. It's a Hanak 230 BL. You can use whatever you want, but it's a medium wire hook. Now, if I want this fly, I'll tie this on a heavier wire hook, which a lot of times I use a Dohiku blob hook. So I'll have a heavy wire and a medium wire. And so the weight to this fly, the secret of it is having a couple different hooks. And the hook is all about how fast it's going to sink, how deep you want it to go. I like to fish 2 of these patterns. So I like a heavy one, sometimes in the same size, and then a lighter one on the top dropper, or I'll mess with the hackle. That's something Arthur Cove spent a lot of time on. He goes a little overboard on it, but it matters. I'll explain it in a moment. So don't overdo the body, but I go just past the bend of the hook, as you can see there. If I had silver wire, which I brought up for this, and something just, I don't know, just gone away. So again, don't tie this with red. It's silver, 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 all day silver. We'll see what this looks like in red. I'm sure it'll work, but not as good as silver. Black and silver really imitates the buzzers. It looks a lot like the segmented body. But this particular fly, while simple, absolutely deadly. So all I'm doing is covering the wire that's supposed to be silver, but it's red. And so you can see I just covered the body with a black thread base. All you're going to do wrap, and I like to just go slightly wider with each wrap. There's no way the fish care at all. I just like the look of it. You totally don't have to do that. So again, if this was silver, it would pop a bit more, but you wrap that with silver wire. Two ways you can take wire. You can just trim it, or you can spend some time here doing this, trying to save your scissors. We'll see if I can do it, or if I lose patience, and I've lost patience. I'm going to just cut it. Okay, so next we're going to get some black hen hackle, or blend, as I just said. So black hen hackle. This is nothing at all fancy in this. This is like the cheapest hen hackle you can find. Don't go crazy. Don't use your really expensive dry fly hackle that's webbing. And what makes a good dry fly hackle is webbing, and this is just cheap stuff. We don't need, like, what I like about it is it actually has a lot of movement built into it. And I'm going a little bit wider than the hook cap. So this is a pretty big fly. So again, I'm going to go wider. And you see I've stroked back the fibers here. I'm just going to take it and trim that. So I end up like this. You can see that, right? So tie it in. So this is so you got two variables on this fly. So it's dead simple to tie if you get the wire right. But it is the hook density and the number of wraps. So what you can do is kind of change a thread head or do that. I tend to not overdo it too much. There's certain ways you can mark it, or just put it in different part of your fly box. If I do like the usual, I would do is just 2 wraps. So I'm just going to take that like so and do 1, 2, like your standard kind of wet fly. So that's a 2 wrap. If I want it to actually sink slower, 3 wraps. If I want it to really sink slow, 4 wraps, no more than 4. So this is the most dense version. I'll do that one. The least you can do is 1 wrap. So it's essentially got nothing to it. But this, the old 4 wrapper, is about the extent you would do. And it does actually make a difference on how the fly will sink. But I tend to do the heavy wrap ones, like a 4 and a 1, so I could kind of look at them and tell the difference. The 4 wraps I do on the top dropper. So when we say dropper, this is one where I'd fish 3 flies or 2 flies. These are subtle patterns. I like using 3 of these, or 1, you call it a crisp packet buzzer, or some type of buzzer, epoxy buzzer on the point. But 3 of these are awesome. I'll do the heaviest or biggest fly on the point. That's the farthest away from your fly line. The second fly, I just go 6, 6, 6 or 5, 5, 5 off a floating line. That's all you need to do. Or you could use a slow sinker, but right off a floating line. So most hackled and smallest fly on the top dropper, medium or matching the point fly in the middle dropper, and then your heaviest, either it's your biggest, thickest hook, or it's your biggest fly on the point. The reason is you want that to turn over, and it's really about the depth. We're covering all 3 depths. So I think if we got it on a floating line, 5, 5, 5, here's the surface of the water, here's our floating line. I've got the heavy hackled one here, kind of slowly going down. I got one in it, that's at about 2 to 3 feet down. I've got one at the 5 feet away from that, now getting deeper at 3 or 4 feet down. And then on the end of my cast, which is like a 15-footer, now we're starting to get 10 feet down. What you want to do is cast that out, make sure it turns over, give it a couple strips to straighten it out. You want to be straight. You don't want, and really let this work in the wind. The best possible way is to just watch your floating line swing in an arc. And it's a lot like swinging a fly in a river. So if you get a big bend in your line, so your line's looking like this, you can leave it. It's just raising the flies up. If you mend it a couple times, take the bend out of the wind, they go deeper. And so you're really now playing with a couple of different depths, and there is current when the wind is blowing. So if you get into, if the wind's behind you and you're casting straight down, unfortunately, you're just going to have to kind of slowly bring it in. If the wind's blowing at you, no problem. I mean, minus the casting piece. but you cast into that wind, make sure it turns over, keep up with it. It's coming right back at you. It's almost like nymphing in a river. Those flies are getting deeper and coming right back at you. But if you don't keep up with it and watch that kind of tip of your line where the fly line's going for a jump or a twitch, you're going to miss the takes. And then, you're fishing 3 different depths. So this is the real natural. They've been feeding on buzzers, all through the winter. Real natural, tends to pull some bigger fish. A really, really must-have without the red wire, with silver wire in your box, for sure, 100% sure. I've probably done the best. This Cove pattern, the black spider, has been my best in the spring. I start fishing it later in the season, doesn't work as good for me. But you can see, if I bring that a little bit closer, picture that had silver wire. That's a heavy wrapped one. That's got movement made into it. It looks just like a buzzer. You don't have to add dubbing. I know you're going to want to. Don't. Just leave it alone. The reason is it sinks better. It fishes better. It's super durable. It's a fantastic fly. Those of you who fished a zebra midge before as well, it absolutely is the same kind of idea. Silver and black is fantastic. If you really need to make a variation on it and you just can't help yourself, you can put a little bit of hot orange thread, but I don't really bother with it. But if you really need it, like, I need something more on this pattern, throw a little bit of orange thread and then tie the fly as I just did. The key being, again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, it's the hook size and weight, and the number of hackles is going to dictate how you want to fish this fly. The fish are all up. Put 3 of your big hackled lightest and let them just kind of drop through, let them fall through. If their fish are deep, put your sparse ones and let them, you're going to have to figure it out on the day. The fish move around a ton in the spring. They're up and down in the water column as the temperature changes. They're moving around a lot as the temperature changes. And if there's freshly stocked fish, pull your stuff through here like this, or your mop, but they'll both work on wintered over fish. But when you get those wintered over fish that are starting to feed on naturals, or stock fish that get more in the zone, they're going to be all over something black. So every bug or every piece of food item in the spring is usually black. Nature's way of making sure they can stay warm enough. So those would be my top 3 flies, and I'll take any questions on how to fish them. Otherwise, I would say enjoy, have fun, and then flip me any notes if you need to, or go through Emma at the club and she'll pass my way, and I'm happy to answer any questions. No questions on the chat? You guys are going to mop it up? Sorry, I couldn't help it. All right, so mop. Mop and the Pepe Lopez are some of my favorite flies over the last 2 seasons. Oh yeah, Emma, go buy some mops. Have some fun. I will tell, like, I did a kids class once, and we tied a bunch of these, and this poor little girl, like 4 or 5 years old, started getting dragged in the water. She was just killing it. And you can buy other colors as well. Pink is good. Orange is good. Cream, if you can find it, is fantastic. But if I could fish one mop fly, it'd be that. Spring, second would be pink. Pink is a good cold water color. If I went to my top 5 flies, I would throw a pink blob in here, if you like that, and something else with some pink in it. But black and green is hard to beat. So hope everybody's COVIDing well. I can't wait to see you up at the club. Have a fantastic night, everybody. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.